Marshall McLuhan is undoubtedly one of the most prescient and frequently misunderstood thinkers of our time. He's better known for his phrases like "the medium is the message" and "the global village" than he is for his name. Perhaps that's because his message was more powerful than his medium. But McLuhan was a much deeper thinker than is generally realized. Yes, he was a philosopher of media, but for him media didn't just mean communication, it meant everything. And his formula, "the medium is the message," is as simple as it is profound. The medium is the message has become a cliché in media theory and beyond, but I'd like to argue that it is far deeper than people believe, despite its apparent simplicity. Now, to understand McLuhan's seminal work, Understanding Media, we have to look first at the title itself and its hidden message. We need to try to understand the very nature of understanding, not theoretically, but quite literally. The English word understanding is very helpful in that regard because the word itself means understanding. To understand something, anything, means to stand under. Under what, you might ask? The answer is under the light.
Mr. McLuhan, this question is inevitable, I guess. You're probably sick of it. Why is the medium the message? Why is not the message the message?
Where would you look for the message in an electric light?
Is there necessarily a message in an electric?
There certainly is. Or a candle. The medium and the message are the same.
The light, be it the sun or the light bulb, usually comes from above. When I am standing in the room looking around me, I am understanding the message of the light bulb, which is everything I see. I understand there's a table, a chair, a painting, and so on. In other words, I'm understanding the message of the light, the object that it shows me. But what I don't understand is the medium, which is the light itself. The paradox of understanding in this case is that I see all the things under the light, but what I never see is the light itself. If I look at a table, I see it lit up in a certain way, but I don't see the light as such. What McLuhan's formula, "the medium is the message," is trying to do is to enlighten us to the nature of the medium itself and not the message. He wants us to see the light, quite literally. It is a mistake to think that McLuhan's term, "the medium," is just about the media of communication, like books, radio, or the internet. Indeed, he talks a lot about these too, but for McLuhan, the medium is everything that is mediating our understanding of the world around us. And the first medium, of course, is light. McLuhan was not just a media guru, he was part of a school of thought that emerged in the 20th century called Phenomenology. Phenomenology, sometimes also called existentialism, was the philosophical school popularized by thinkers such as Edmund Husserl and especially Martin Heidegger, who sought to enlighten the nature of light as such, otherwise known as existence, life, or being. The word phainein in Greek means to shine forth, which is a direct reference to the light. To put it simply, if I see that a table is, I understand the message that the table is in front of me. But what is the nature of that very is? What is the nature of the being of this table, of the phenomenon, of that which shines forth when I say the table is? It is thinking about the understanding, not of the message, but of the medium, understanding as such, the standing under the light. McLuhan's formula, "the medium is the message," actually echoes Martin Heidegger's magnum opus, Being and Time. What McLuhan calls the message, Heidegger calls being. What McLuhan calls the medium, Heidegger calls time. The nature of time as the invisible medium of being is similar to that of light. In our daily experience, we see everything in time or through time, but we do not see time as such anywhere. Just as we do not see the light, but only everything covered by the light. Time, for Heidegger, the phenomenologist, is that very invisible, transparent, and transcendent medium, by means of which we see being in its entirety, that which we call space. But if I look at a table standing right in front of me, the medium I actually understand it through is not space, but invisible time. Wherever or whenever I look around me, I see nothing but space, with its tangible, visible, and obvious properties. But what I don't see is time itself, the hidden medium of the now that puts everything in place for my understanding. And here again, the English word understanding helps us grasp the nature of time and of the now, which we call the instant. The Latin word instans literally means what stands in, or what is put in place. The instant of time is the very medium, the light, which shines towards me in my understanding. Space as such, with its seemingly static properties, can be made constant only through the instant of time. Therefore, space is the content of time. Space is the message that we see, while time is the invisible medium that we don't see. What I see is only the message, the table and space in the room, and so forth. But I don't see time, and yet I know it is there. It exists somewhere. It passes, and yet I see nothing passing. All I see is the table standing under the light at that particular instant. That instant is constant. Both words lead us back to the nature of standing and understanding. That is Heidegger's Phenomenology. The invisible medium which shines forth is time, and what it shows us is space.
At the heart of being and time, and therefore of Heidegger's philosophy as a whole, is one deceptively simple question. What is really meant by the verb to be? We all think we understand what we mean when we say that someone or something is. But do we? Or are we, as Heidegger thought, letting the familiarity of the word itself blind us to what is really the greatest mystery of all?
Do we, in our time, have an answer to the question of what we really mean by the word being? Not at all. But are we nowadays even perplexed at our inability to understand the expression being? Not at all. Our aim in the following treatise is to work out the question of the meaning of being, and to do so concretely. Our provisional aim is the interpretation of time as the possible horizon for any understanding whatsoever of being.
Immanuel Kant, no small figure he, had said that space and time were equally important. They were the way we organized our world. The very young Heidegger never forget. He's writing this as a very, very young man, says not at all. Space is an almost insignificant category. Time is the mystery.
Time and human existence are inextricably linked, according to Heidegger. Our being, he says, is really a process of becoming. And this key insight leads him to reject the idea that there is such a thing as a fixed human essence.
Now, there are words and expressions that confirm Heidegger's phenomenological insight into this peculiar relation between visible space and invisible time. In English, we say something is way too obvious, which already tells us what is obvious, the way itself, that is, space. While the very word obvious comes from the Latin obviam, where via means the way. So obvious literally means something like standing in the way. It obstructs the view with the way, focusing on space rather than time. McLuhan, of course, knew this very well. His seemingly cliché term, the medium is the message, is a genius simplification of a very complex and notoriously inaccessible study of phenomenology.
But now, I mentioned this peeping through, the light coming through the situation. That is called, by the way, phenomenology. It took me a long time to discover. The phenomenologists managed to cover their tracks pretty well. They like to make out that they're a very serious bunch, hard-headed, logical people. The Heideggers and the Husserls and so on. All they're telling you, and this has been for ever since Hegel and his phenomenological stuff, ever since Hegel, all they have been telling you is this, that behind every situation, there's another situation that peeps through. And that peeping through is phenomenology. And I call it simply the medium is the message, or the figure in the ground. The ground comes through the figure, or the figure comes through the ground. It can be both ways. But it's that process of light through that is phenomenology. Now, when you think of the thousands of books that have been written without even getting close to saying that. Why are they motivated to conceal their credentials? I've discovered this in most of the highbrow activities of our world.
And here's McLuhan explaining phenomenology and the illusion of static space with its obvious visual message while forgetting the invisible medium of time.
The visual man has very much an inclination to make things contain things, but visual space has very peculiar properties. Static. Most people think of space as static. As, for example, the space between you and me, as something that is constant. That is, between you and me, there are so many inches or so many measures, and that those are the same no matter who's sitting there. To a pre-literate man, space has no static properties at all. They're entirely determined by the people or things that are involved in the spatial relationship. So that a person is thought of as creating his own kind of space and not as being inside space. The pre-literate man, the man who lives more by ear than by eye, does not think of himself as being in space at all. There's a delightful little illustration of how pre-literate people, children, feel space. A child on his first airplane flight said, as they took off and climbed higher and higher, he said, "Daddy, when do we start to get smaller?"
This distinction between the pre-literate and the literate, or rather the visual and the acoustic, brings us closer to McLuhan's home turf, the study of media and its effects on society, including its philosophical views and views of reality as such. For McLuhan, phenomenology is a mode of thinking that is not based on visual comprehension at all, but on an acoustic and purely linguistic way of understanding reality. Because where would you look for understanding if not in the very word understanding as such? How do you actually see the light, the medium, if all your eyes can see is only that which the light covers, the obviousness of the message? When your eyes only see the message, what helps you in understanding the medium is the medium of communication and in fact of all understanding, and that is language. This is why phenomenology, the relatively new philosophy of the 20th century, is not a philosophy of the eye, but of the ear. And this is Heidegger himself saying that.
Die Aufgabe, die dem Denken gestellt ist heute, wie ich es verstehe, ist in einer Weise neu, dass es eine ganz neue Methode des Denkens verlangt. Dieses Denken ist in der Sache sehr viel einfacher als die Philosophie, aber im Vollzug sehr viel schwieriger und verlangt eine neue Sorgfalt der Sprache.
Language, with its acoustic non-visual properties, is the only way to see the medium and not just the message. It is the only way to get the obviousness of the way out of the way, as it were, in order to see time, light, and the nature of being itself. We have just heard Heidegger using his method of thinking through a careful use of language. He used the word method deliberately because the Greek word meta hodos literally means beyond and above the way. There we have it, the phenomenological method of thinking described in seemingly mundane words, where we are moving beyond the obvious way of space to see the invisible medium of time. McLuhan's insistence that the medium is more important than the message is a reminder for a visually oriented, particularly Western mode of thinking that what is visible is not the whole story of perception. Far from it, pun intended. Now, why is the Western mode of thinking so particularly visual? This is where the media of communication come into play. Historically, the Gutenberg revolution, or the Gutenberg galaxy as McLuhan called it, occurred to a massive extent only in the West. Surely, writing with its visual and static properties was used in other cultures long before Gutenberg, but it was only in the West that print had such a massive yet hidden impact on the structure of society. Take this observation from Dostoevsky. Reading books and having them bound are two different stages of development, and there's a vast gulf between them. To begin with, a man gradually gets used to reading, but takes no care of his books and throws them about. But binding implies respect for books. It implies that he looks upon it as something of value. That period has not been reached anywhere in Russia yet. In Europe, books have been bound for a long while. Even Dostoevsky, representing the powerhouse of Russian literature, admits that Russia was not yet a literate country in its fundamentals, unlike Europe, where the medium of the book had been physically and psychologically bound into the culture for centuries. Here's literary critic George Steiner speaking about an 18th century painting, The Reading Philosopher, and the almost ritualistic attitude towards handling a book in those times.
The philosophe lisant Chardin, in one single painting, seems to me to incorporate every single aspect of what I've tried to do in my work, tried to teach as a teacher, and simply as an ordinary human being concerned with the miracle and mystery of reading. I want to show the different features. He's beautifully dressed. In fact, this fur hat and the wonderful fur coat, some have said it is meant to suggest the solemn clothes of a rabbi on a high holiday. We don't know. There is that suggestion, as there is in Rembrandt pictures, which have, of course, influenced Chardin. I like to read it differently. He's meeting his best friend, namely the author of the book. And when you meet a great friend, you dress well, like we love to wash our hands before meeting a friend. You do him, Italian word cortesia, the courtesy of heart of saying, welcome into me, welcome into the home of myself, I'm ready to receive you. He has his pen next to his reading. Serious reading means to read with a pen in your hand. What do you do with the pen? You underline, you take notes on the page, you write around the margin. What are you really doing? You are in dialogue with the book. You are answering it. You are speaking to it. And if you are very arrogant and very ambitious, you're saying secretly, I can write a better one. And that is the beginning of a certain relationship of passionate joy and love with the text.
And of course, the definitive novel depicting this new Western obsession with the printed word is Cervantes' Don Quixote.
The reason for their lack of reason, of my reason, is so unreasonable that it is not without reason that I complain of your beauty.
Don Quixote, your soup is ready.
It is the story of a man so obsessed with books of knighthood that he loses his mind and becomes the knight himself. McLuhan notes in Understanding Media, Cervantes devoted his Don Quixote entirely to the aspect of the printed word and its power to create what James Joyce designates as the ABCED-minded, which can be taken as absent, absent, or just alphabetically controlled. Shakespeare, who died in the same year as Cervantes, observed the same impact of the newly arrived print medium. In Hamlet, Polonius asks the prince,
What do you read, my lord?
Words. Words.
Words. What is the matter, my lord?
Between whom?
I mean, the matter you read, my lord.
Flanders, sir.
Polonius, with his tongue in cheek, points out Hamlet's absent-mindedness. What is the matter with Hamlet, he wonders, to be suddenly consumed by these strange words written on paper? This was the new medium that would transform Western society in every aspect, from religion to commerce. There's a strong correlation, as McLuhan's intellectual predecessor, the Canadian Harold Innis, pointed out, between the level of literacy in Northern Europe and the adoption of Protestantism. When you can read the Bible at home quietly in your own language, be it German, Swedish, or Dutch, you no longer have to go to a cathedral to listen to a priest's sermon in Latin. Northern Europe became a highly visual, highly literate society. The split between the Catholics and the Protestants is perfectly depicted in the 1614 painting by the Dutchman Adriaan van de Vene, Fishing for Souls. On one side, the Protestants fish for the souls with Bibles and pamphlets. On the other, the Catholics used nets and music accompanied by choir boys singing. It was Northern Europe that became more absent-minded than the rest of the continent. The Spaniard, the southerner Don Quixote, was one such character, but his companion Sancho Panza was still illiterate and spoke in parables. By putting these two together, Cervantes was showing that very split, the tension between the new visual absent-mindedness and the old acoustic tradition. It was the new world of the eye focusing on the message and the old world of the ear living in the medium. Don Quixote and Sancho Panza were the medium and the message traveling together. They represent the left and right hemispheres of the brain, which psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist calls the master and his emissary. The Gutenberg absent-mindedness eventually spread into commerce and the market system, quintessentially Western concept, an almost religious approach to what is written on paper and signed as a contract. In A Merchant of Venice, Shakespeare shows that a commercial contract once signed is trusted with a weight nearly equal to a death sentence. When Shylock lends money to Antonio, whose ships have capsized, the contract stipulates that Antonio owes Shylock not just money, but a pound of his own flesh. It is an absurd demand, but because it is written and signed, Shylock demands it at all costs. A signed contract had become as tangible and real as a physical body of the one who owes it. Today we still see the ghost of this idea in the word corporation, literally giving a body to a legal document. All of this absent-mindedness was the effect on a visible medium, print. Society changed without people realizing what was happening to them. Just as Don Quixote didn't realize the books were the very thing transforming him. The awareness of the effect of print was absent in those days. The medium was completely invisible. It always is. It is the light which shines everywhere, but is itself nowhere to be seen. Only the genius of an artist, a Cervantes or a Shakespeare, could be enlightened enough to see the light of the medium. With the dawn of the electric age, the light has almost literally spread to the whole planet. Not just the physical light of a bulb, but the light of information. Every phone screen or monitor is an electric gadget that lights up the world. And why do I say that light is information? Because the relation between light and information is the same relation between the medium and the message. The table that I see under the light is information. It has a specific form, the recognizable form of a table. That makes it information. Everything I see around me, not just on the screen, is informed by the light. Light gives every object its form, its shape. But again, light as the medium is invisible. Only the message, the formed object that I see under it, are. The relation between the two, the light and the object, the medium and the message, is what we call information. So much so that we call our current era the information age, a term coined by the father of information theory, Claude Shannon, whose name, by the way, is shared by the AI chatbot Claude. Shannon gave information a simple formula, the reduction of uncertainty. And as it later turned out, Shannon's discoveries paved the way not just to computers and digital data storage, but even to biology and the structure of the DNA. Soon after Shannon, biologists James Watson and Francis Crick discovered that even DNA contains information, the famous double helix. They saw a pattern of 4 letters, A, C, G, and T, standing for specific chemicals that function as instruction for life. It turns out James Joyce was right. We aren't just absent-minded, we are also ACGT-bodied. We are quite literally made of letters, of information. In the information age, reality as such is seen as a code to be cracked, and reducing our certainty by moving towards certainty by gathering more and more information, be it in big text data collection, biology, or just everyday life, is the main sport of the day. In Understanding Media, McLuhan notes that man, the food gatherer, reappears incongruously as information gatherer. In this role, electronic man is no less a nomad than his Paleolithic ancestors. This new integration of electric information and the expansion of the medium to the whole globe in an instant of time, not space, is what McLuhan called the global village. The electric global village is where the light shines everywhere all at once. All human affairs are now understood under the same light of a unified information set, which paradoxically doesn't reduce uncertainty but on the contrary increases it. This in turn requires even more information to cope with it. We are now in a perfect storm situation where the expansion of information available requires even more information to manage human affairs. All the planet is now under one single light bulb of electricity which shines through every gadget and screen. As Marshall observed elsewhere, in the electric age you are not going anywhere because you're always already there. That is the new medium we live in. That is our new ABCED-mindedness, only this time with more screen and less ABCED. We are blind to the medium by focusing only on the message, as we always were in every era, be it pre-literate, literate, or post-literate ages. And as always, the artist remains the main visionary, seeing the medium behind the message. Perhaps the most vivid example of the medium is the message in art is Kazimir Malevich's Black Square. In that painting, the medium is the message. It is a black square framed in a black square. It shows itself and nothing else. In cinema, the black square is echoed by the monolith in Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey. It is an enigma that puzzles humanity from our primate ancestors to our spacefaring descendants. No one knows what the black square represents, but Kubrick gives us a clue. The movie begins with a black screen shown for nearly 3 minutes. The message is the medium, which is the cinema screen itself. While we watch apes staring at a black square, we fail to realize that the first people staring at the black square were us, sitting in the theater. The observers are being observed in an informational closed loop. In the information age, we don't stare at black squares, but at light squares. The medium continues to be invisible because it is way too obvious. But we aren't foolish. We're just human. As McLuhan famously put it, one thing fish know nothing about is water, since they have no anti-environment which would enable them to perceive the element they live in.
It's like the fish in the water. We don't know who discovered water, but we know it wasn't a fish. A pervasive medium, a pervasive environment is always beyond perception.